important it is to make the effort to fight against anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, etc., racism, of course, and I want to thank the Congress for its role in this continuing effort. A week ago, there was an international conference at Yad Vashem Museum to the memory of the Holocaust, and with my editor, I devoted something like 5 to 7 minutes of the International Hour, which is an eternity in radio and television time, in our daily program dedicated to international news, to interview Professor Dina Porat, who is a well-known scholar on the Holocaust, on this vast subject, and some points. Some of them perhaps were a little bit hard for our listeners, such as whether continuing reports on various Holocausts or claims to Holocausts in Rwanda, to the Indians, to the blacks, to Armenians, etc., are diminishing the role of the Holocaust, or perhaps contribute to its remembrance, and what are the criteria that differentiate between a massacre and a genocide and the Holocaust. And in the last Congress, there was an item by my colleague Natalia Kanevsky on this Congress, and I will report from this Congress. Actually, I think I'll do it this evening. And it is not obvious that radio and television services, even public ones, do the effort in their news magazines to cover such events. Of course, I have the privilege to work in a public broadcasting authority, not commercial TV. So, we broadcast just now the great 6-part documentary series called Apocalypse. And in the various programs, especially news and documentaries, we broadcast a lot on this subject, so we can rest on our laurels, say that, okay, we are fighting for the good cause, we are fighting against anti-Semitism, against Holocaust denial, etc. But not so alone. And I think that what is more important is then that when we cover, let's say, the events in Ukraine, or the Baltic states, or Hungary, and I'm talking even about the last year alone, we try to emphasize the historical context, to explain, not to justify, but to know and explain the various factors that contribute to what we see today in those countries and not only them. So when Hungary, let's say, want to take the Hungary diaspora and give them Hungarian passports and ID, people have to understand it on the background of the Trianon treaties, etc., etc. In Ukraine, in a sentence or two, after all, I'm doing television and radio and not university courses, we have to understand the starvation of the 30s if we want to understand what is happening in Ukraine these days. We cannot do the simple job and say, in any event, and again, let me emphasize, there is no justification whatsoever to desecration of graveyards, to attack of Jews because they are Jews. No justification. But we have to know and understand our enemy. We have to know that the names such as Khmelnytsky or Petlura or Bandera, they have meanings to Ukrainians not only as anti-Semitists, not only as doing pogroms, but as heroes or villains. And we have to know this background. We have to know who we are fighting against in this battle against distortion of history. And of course, even in Western Europe, we have to understand the rise of the extreme right in Eastern Europe or Western Europe. We have to know that what is happening in Spain, for example, we have to know it against the background of the civil war in the 1930s, etc., etc. Every time something is happening in this large sphere of Jewish life, we cover it. We make a point of covering it. From anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli remarks by, let's say, American reporter Helen Thomas a couple of weeks ago, or Canadian MP the last week, to this event on the other side of the coin. But this is done mainly, and sadly, sometimes only, by public TV and public radio. In the commercial channels, the agenda is different, and perhaps it should be. Anti-Semitism, desecration of Jewish graveyard, this Congress, they are not newsworthy in the sense that they are not interesting enough to the thinking of the people who take the decisions there. And discussion on the background of the extreme right in Ukraine, people will fall asleep. It doesn't sell commercials, therefore it doesn't exist on the screen. In print, the situation is better, thanks to the commitment of colleagues. Some of them are here in this room as I speak. So this is the lesson that I want to emphasize, that if we, not only we as media, but we who are fighting against distortion of history, if we want to educate, if we want our readers and our viewers and our listeners to know more, you, the Congress, and people who take the decision have to identify. The most important thing is to identify the people in various media organizations who are committed, who are interested, of course preferably in positions of power. So they are willing to fight, if necessary, inside the system to bring the items out to our viewers and listeners and readers. And of course, I, and again my colleagues here in this room, we all live in media world, where the important is relegated daily because of the new, because of the urgent. And editors want this subject only if they do not have any other choice. Only if there is a day of remembrance or International Holocaust Day or something that is so huge that they can't ignore it. In foreign news, they will always prefer the very nice panda cub who was born in the zoo to anti-Semitic event in wherever in the world. But we try. And the impact, the accumulating impact of a strong documentary film, of an interview about, that I did again a couple of weeks ago, there was a new book about the death match of Dynamo Kiev in 1941. They accumulate, and people are interested. It is not true that they are not. It is a long battle fought daily that will never be won completely, and it is our job as Jews, as Israelis, as journalists, you know what, as human beings, to continue to carry it out. Thank you very much.